So this surface technique is called Mishima. First thing I'm doing is I have a pot that I've made, and it is leather hard. It's actually a pretty stiff leather hard because I want it to hold its shape very well. It shouldn't be so squishy that if I were to press a pen into it, it would go really deep. What I'm doing here is I'm applying pressure with my pen on a design that I have traced out, and it's not going very deep again because my pot is quite firm already. So that'll be step one, is have a pot made, let it get leather hard, and then on tracing paper, draw out the design that you want, and you'll see what the final result is at the end of this. So once you see what the end result is, come up with a design, draw it on tracing paper, and then using, again, a pen, that's what I find that works best, is trace it out onto your pot to get a nice little outline. And then once this is all done, I will speed it up and show you how deep we need to go in before we continue to the next step. And by the way, the results of this work best if your drawing is a line design. Okay, so designs are all traced out. Now the next important thing is making sure your actual carving is nice and deep. So what I am again doing is using just a regular ballpoint pen, and I'm going back into those lines that you can now see and making my carving a little bit deeper. Now, it's kind of hard to explain how deep is deep enough just verbally and with a video without actually being able to show you in person. Just try to press firmly enough so that you're not breaking through your pot, but those lines are nice and pronounced. So what you can also see is every now and then I will brush those clay boogers out of my design because those will get in our way later on. And the other thing is just really please, like I said, try to use a pen for this. If you are using a needle tool, your lines are not going to be wide enough to be successful with the actual Mishima part. So these lines are relatively wide and relatively deep. All right, so on to the next step once you're done. Now, not to confuse you, but I did swap out the project that I was showing. So that little sea-themed jug is now a cat dish for my cat. But what I'm doing now is I am selecting a color of underglaze, and with a little bit of blended up slip, I am mixing that underglaze into the slip. Try not to use too much underglaze for this because I do think for mine I poured a little too much and I just don't want to be wasteful. But the reason we are mixing underglaze into slip is because we're essentially trying to create a colored slip. And the reason we want a colored slip and not just underglaze is because this is thicker and will therefore fill in my carved lines much better. So those lines that you just carved out, you will take your underglaze and slip mixture and just start to fill in those carved lines. So I'm going to do this several times, allowing drying in between, because as each layer dries, it will contract and shrink a little bit and it will no longer fully fill those lines. It'll sink a little bit. So what I'm doing is brushing into those carved lines several times as it dries, because overall I want that final slip mixture to be at the same surface level as the walls of my pot, not sunken below. And here is where you start to see why we are doing this. So once the underglaze is mostly dry, I'm going to take a smooth rib, and what I want to do is scrape away the surface of what I just did. So you're scraping away all of that excess underglaze and a little bit of the clay surface, and it is very hard to see now, but what I'm doing is I'm revealing the slip that is now inlaid into my carved lines, and that is what Mishima is. Now, this whole time I have left my pot in that leather hard stage, and actually the fact that I re-wet some of that surface with the slip, it softened it up just enough that I'm getting a really nice scrape. This is probably going to be one of the more difficult surface techniques because you have to maintain it in that perfect leather hard state. If it's too soft, you might end up squishing your pot. If it is too dry, this might not scrape away very easily. If that's the case, I'll throw in a little clip at the end and show you how you can use an X-Acto blade because it's easier to scrape at a more bone dry project. But what you should be able to do is use this metal rib. I also implore you to do this part on the slow side. My video is sped up, but I took a good 6 or so minutes to fully scrape away all of that underglaze because I want to make sure all of those lines are nice and clean. Again, because the purple is really hard to see against the brown clay, just make sure you're scraping everything away and not leaving like little bits, or you'll see that once it's fired. A darker color might be easier to see. But, you know, go a few different directions. I started off going side to side. Now I'm going up and down just to clean it up. And again, this is hard to see, but I will show you the end result very soon. And this is what it looks like before I put it in for the bisque firing. And here are the results after bisque firing. You can now much more easily see those colors. And now what I'm going to do is put a clear coat and some regular glaze. And here is the final product with glaze. You can see all of that hard work. I have these nice clean lines now, and everything is the same level. If I run my finger across it, it all feels very smooth. Very cool technique if you want lots of surface detail and don't trust yourself with a brush. And as promised, here's what you can do if you find that your project is a little too dry to use the straight rib tool. So you can see here, I'm having a little bit of trouble. I'm also using only underglaze and not slip glaze in this video. But here you can see I am pulling out an X-Acto blade. It is nice and sharp, and just holding that blade right up against the surface, just gently scratching away the upper layers of slip to reveal those incised lines. So it's a little more difficult just because the clay is dry, but it does the job for the sake of getting your assignment done. You can see it leaves the surface of the clay a little bit more, angled and marred up, you could say. It's not as smooth as it could be, but again, it does the job. And this is nice too because you can see the immediate results of the black underglaze right up against the clay. And I'll show you the final results, but overall the reason I didn't really like this technique was because it was straight underglaze. It kind of left those lines a little bit sunken still, and when I carved away, it took some of those line designs away. Those brown, like kelp and bubbles, actually worked the best because that was a slip mixture. That wasn't just straight underglaze, but the straight underglaze, it didn't work as well. So there you have it.